Historian St. Louis Chapter, St. Louis Public Library, Steedman Architectural Library Lecture Series. On behalf of the St. Louis Public Library, Steedman Architectural Library, we are pleased to continue our collaboration with the Society of Architectural Historians St. Louis Chapter and host this lecture series. Before we begin, we ask that you all please mute your devices. Should you be joining us remotely and have questions, please type them into the comment section. After our talk tonight, we will pose your questions and those from our audience to tonight's speaker, John Guenther. Now I'd like to introduce John C. Guenther, FAIEIIA, Lead AP, an architect, who serves as president of the Society of Architectural Historians St. Louis Chapter. John has produced a distinguished body of architecture that contributes significantly to the built environment, with projects ranging from the adaptive reuse of historic landmarks to new projects that fit comfortably into their physical, environmental, social, and historic contexts. His work has received over 50 national, regional, and local awards from the American Institute of Architects and a diverse array of professional organizations, civic groups, and publications. In 2010, John was elevated to fellowship in the American Institute of Architects for notable contributions to the advancement of the profession of architecture and design. John serves as the president of the Society of Architectural Historians St. Louis Chapter. As an architect, John seeks to contribute through his designs an architecture which serves and ennobles our lives, works with the environment, and enhances our world. As a historian, he recognizes that we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us. Tonight, John will talk about Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, an illustrated timeline. This is a story 352 years in the making. It begins in 1673 with Marquette and Joliet coming down the Mississippi River. It concludes in 2025 with the latest refinements at the new cathedral. John's book is an illustrated timeline of 138 key moments which trace the establishment and the development of St. Louis, the influence of Catholicism, and the building of the Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, the Old Cathedral, in 1834, St. John the Apostle and Evangelist in 1860, the Pro Cathedral, 1864 to 1914, and the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, 1914 to present. This format allows for a greater appreciation and understanding of the new cathedral, highlighting its architectural and structural design and refinements, building construction, the design, fabrication, installation, and completion of magnificent mosaics and key moments in time, all with illustrations. And now, please welcome John as he presents Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, an illustrated timeline, and takes a chronological look at the historic foundations of one of the greatest cathedrals of the world. John.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure and privilege to be able to speak to you about the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, an illustrated timeline. But I'd also like to say it's great to be in partnership with the St. Louis Public Library, Central Library, Steedman Architectural Library, and the Society of Architectural Historians to present 6 lectures this year. And it's a special year because this is our 250th anniversary of the U.S. And so these are very historically oriented talks. Next up, we'll have Esley Hamilton on March 24th, speaking about William Morris and the arts and crafts movement in America. April 28th, we will have John Pellerin speaking about William Rumbold's Dome Revisited. And September 22nd, we will have Bob Moore speaking about the architecture of colonial St. Louis, 1764 to 1804. On October 27th, we will have Andrew Weil speaking about fortified St. Louis, the defensive architecture of a strategic American city and environs 1175 to 1865. And our last presentation, November 17th, Christy Finzel and Michael Meyer will be speaking about what archaeology can tell us about St. Louis's earliest French building. So it's a great lineup, and it's a privilege to begin this series. So with that, we will get underway with our book, and the book that I've written on the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, and walk you through that. But also by way of introduction, I am an architect, and these are a range of projects that I've had the privilege of working on over my 50 years. The largest project in the upper left, the Chaffetz Arena. The smallest project, the Raccoon Club in our backyard with our 4 boys. So it's been a wide range, architecture at all scales. And we will now begin with the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, an illustrated timeline. And it does begin in 1673 with the Joliet Marquette expedition as they traveled from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan down to explore the central part of the United States. It was a missionary trip to spread the word of faith to the indigenous peoples, as well as to explore the Mississippi River and where it was leading. Of note, as they passed the bluffs near Alton, what is today Alton, they saw the Piasaw, and it struck both fear and admiration in terms of seeing this amazing, magnificent creature painted on the rocks. And Father Marquette said, this is from a higher civilization to be able to reach those heights and paint so beautifully. So noted. They began in from St. Ignace Mission, 1671, founded by Marquette, and they traveled down the rivers. They went across Lake Michigan into Green Bay, up the Fox River, portaged in the Wisconsin River, and then down the Mississippi River, discovering the Missouri River and the Illinois River. On their return, the indigenous peoples told them to take the Illinois River back up to St. Ignace. Upon arriving there, then Joliet then went on up to Quebec to report on the findings. And so this, believe it or not, with these two canoes, it was 6 months of travel. It's amazing to think the ground that they covered, or the water that they covered. And if you think it's really early to start in terms of context, and that's what I wanted to do, was provide context to everyone in reading this book and better understanding the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis. In fact, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, when you walk in the nave, look up to your left, there's an arch panel of mosaics, and it memorializes the Joliet Marquette expedition of 1673 in the west arch wall. So they too are recognizing the importance of that early date. Now, of interest, as I was researching this for this book, I learned more about the missions in the Illinois country, 1698. And Cahokia was actually established before St. Louis, almost a lifetime before, about 66 years before St. Louis. And 3 priests from Canada came down in 1698, and December 7th they arrived. December 8th they traveled to the west side of the bank of the Mississippi for the first Mass on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And it's called the Day of the Three Masses because the 3 priests celebrated Mass on a rock outcropping. And if you were to find that rock today, it's basically where Arsenal Street is, i.e. Anheuser-Busch. So that's the landing that they made to celebrate the first Mass on the west side of the Mississippi River. Then other priests came down the following year and built Holy Family Log Church, which you see here. And this is 1699. And sadly, it burnt in 1740. It was rebuilt in 1799. But the black oak walnut logs that are vertical post on sill French colonial construction, they lean inward to add to the strength. But those logs were actually growing at the time Christopher Columbus set foot in the New World. So that's how ancient this building is. It is the oldest church west of the Alleghenies. It's been in continuous operation as well, in service, and it is only one of 5 that are built in the French colonial style that still exists in North America for this type of religious structure. So definitely worthwhile to go visit it. Absolutely, it's just across the river, across the bridge, turn south, and about 5 minutes later you're at Cahokia at the Holy Family Log Church. Now in 1700, the Middle Valley East Bank was further developed because the Jesuits came back to the area, and the Kaskaskias were up in the upper reaches of the Illinois River, about mid to north central Illinois, and they wanted to leave that area to find more peace and security from the Shawnees who were nearby them, but they would attack them from time to time. So they wanted to head south with the Jesuits, and they did so down the Illinois, down the Mississippi, and they stopped at River des Peres. And they stayed there for 2 years until they went onward to the south and to the East Bank and founded Kaskaskia. And then the town was laid out in these similar French styles with large square blocks divided into 4 quadrants set in a grid of streets. And the French government then established Fort Deschartres, and after 3 times of rebuilding it, finally very, very permanent and away enough from the river and high enough to keep it from flooding, a very, very strong fort you see illustrated here. And so that helped to establish civil, military, and marine government authority, as well as helping with fur trade and lead mining. And the area was the breadbasket of the region. Sorry. So, 1722, the province of Louisiana. So France claimed the province of Louisiana for many, many years, reaching from Quebec all the way to the Gulf and from between the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. And so quite a large area in the center of what would become the U.S. And this was served by three religious orders, the Capuchins, the Carmelites, and the Jesuits. And eventually, the Capuchins the Carmelites had to leave because they had angered the French royalty, so they were sent away. That left it to the Capuchins and the Jesuits. The black robes, the Jesuits, served the north half of this area from basically the Ohio River up, and then the Capuchins, the brown robes served to the south. St. Genevieve was founded about 1735 after mineral deposits were discovered on the west bank. Fine lead outcroppings and lead mining camps were established, as well as there were fertile bottomlands and plentiful hunting grounds. And so this provided for an ideal location for the next city, 1735. And it features beautiful, beautiful French colonial architecture, vertical log construction with beautiful wraparound porches that protects one from the elements, allows cross ventilation and breezes even during a rainy time. And the fireplace is located in the center to radiate heat out. So a very beautifully environmentally planned architecture, to be sure. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 63, that was fought by the British and the French. And with the French losing, they ceded Quebec, the New France, as well as the lands to the east to the English, east to the Mississippi River to the Appalachians, and west to the Rocky Mountains. That was ceded to Spain in a secret treaty in order to protect those citizens and keep it from falling into the hands of the British. 1763, the Maxent and Laclede and Company were granted exclusive rights for trading for 8 years. And so they also were granted the right to establish a trading post near the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. So they traveled upstream from New Orleans, arriving in St. Genevieve and later at Fort Deschartres, and then onward to the confluence. When they reached the confluence, they realized that really was too low. It was prone to flooding, and so it was not a good location for the fur trading operation. So they traveled south again, letting the current take them down about 17 miles to the future St. Louis, which was a fine rock outcropping that formed a plateau to the west. So it was not prone to flooding. Now, February 15th, 1764 is the date that we note as the founding of St. Louis. We celebrated that just last Sunday, 262 years. That's how old St. Louis is on the founding of that date. And so Pierre Laclede spent the winter of 1763 in Fort Deschartres, and then he sent his stepson Chouteau north to start clearing the land and building. And that's what he did. You can see this in this beautiful painting in the upper left from the St. Louis Art Museum. He also was given the plan for St. Louis by his stepfather. And it's been said that Laclede founded and Auguste Chouteau built St. Louis. And so the plan is 3 blocks deep and about 18 blocks north to south. And key to this plan is Cathedral Block. Both in terms of religious activities, educational and social activities, and it was right in the heart of the city. Also, the Chouteau mansion was just a block east of that, closer to the river. And so, Laclede's residence was also the headquarters for Maxent, Laclede and Company, and also served as a place where Lewis and Clark stayed and purchased supplies for their 1804 expedition. Now, in 1764, the Cathedral Block is defined, but there's no church there, and it's not built until 1770. And you see a picture of this vertical log structure, barely more than a shed, if you will, that was built there, but that was not until 1770. However, the first recorded baptism in the parish registry is that of Marie, the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Deschamps and Marie Pignot, who was born in September 1765 and baptized 1766. In French, it's registered as under a tent for lack of church. And it gives me goosebumps to think about this, but I had the privilege of meeting a descendant, a young lady who's a descendant of Marie at one of my recent book signings, and it was really a privilege. So quite something. History is alive and well. That is memorialized in the History of Spiritual Growth in St. Louis, the South Arch Soffit in the Dome of Local History area in the south nave of the cathedral. And you can see it on the left-hand side with the baptism of the child under a tent. It also shows the old cathedral next to it, as well as the old log church to the right, and the first Mass celebrated on the banks of the Mississippi River in 1764 within the town center proper. The next church that was built on that site, 1776, is the second log church, also referred to as the Old Spanish Church. And that is because we were then under the authority of Spain, and therefore we were part of the Diocese of Havana, Cuba. And so this building, you can see, is a little bit bigger, 30 feet wide, 60 feet long. If you want to time travel and experience what it might have been like to attend church or Mass in that old log church, simply drive across, 5 minutes across to Illinois to Cahokia to go to the Holy Family Log Church. It is 32 feet wide, 74 feet long. The church that stood on Cathedral Block was 30 feet by 60 feet. So it's virtually the same size and the same construction as you would have seen had you been on Cathedral Block in 1776. 1780 marks the Battle of St. Louis and the attack on Cahokia. And Britain thought that if they could attack by surprise the city of St. Louis, the village of St. Louis, and take control of it, as well as Cahokia, they could control the Mississippi River and therefore win the battle against the the U.S. in their Declaration of Independence of 1776. And so they got wind of it about 4.5 weeks prior to this surprise attack from the north. And so the Spanish authorities and the townspeople built Fort San Carlos. It's a 30-foot diameter, 40-foot tall stone tower. It's basically at 4th and Walnut, if you were to go back in time. And they also dug trenches up and down to the north and the south with large trees with spikes, wooden spikes to defend the perimeter of the city. And it is also noted that, they also brought in the cannons from Fort Bellefontaine on the Missouri River, and from St. Genevieve, Francois Valley sent up lead and muskets along with the Toussaint's and 60 French militia to join the battle. So Francois Valley is known as the defender of St. Louis. And again, I have had the privilege of meeting a descendant of Francois Valley just a few weeks back as well. So again, history is alive and well. This was a very decisive battle, and within 2 hours, the attackers were sent running. That bell, by the way, was hanging in the belfry of the second log church and was ringing out as people ran in the streets saying to arms, and called the citizens to man their stations. If you want to see where that Fort San Carlos Tower was, 4th and Walnut. So it's just a couple blocks uphill and west of the old cathedral. That was the defensive position, and the dotted lines in this diagram represent the palisades that defended the perimeter. And the old town of St. Louis was, as you know, under the arch grounds there. 1803, the Louisiana Purchase. This was doubled the size of the country in one fell swoop, and was made possible by the U.S. purchasing this land, the rights to it from France after Spain ceded it back to France. And so with that said, there was the Day of the Three Flags, which occurred March 9th of 1804, and that's where they had the Spanish flag, then they flew the French flag, and then the American flag on that site. commemorating the Day of the Three Flags when ownership transferred that many times within that period. So with that, much more land to serve, and about 50,000 more Catholics to serve within that area. So, then that brings, in 1812 to 1818, Louis William Valentine Dubourg, when he arrives. And he is appointed by Bishop Carroll of Baltimore as the administrator apostolic of the Diocese of Louisiana and the two Floridas. And so that was a large responsibility for him to take on. And in doing so, I was struck by the fact that he set about traveling through Europe to ask for help and ask for missionaries and so on. But of note, he was also the spiritual advisor of Elizabeth Ann Seton, who went on to found the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph's in 1809. And that's an important date that I'll come back to later. But at any rate, while he was in France, he was asking for help. He met Father Felix DeAndres, and then he asked him if he would be the director of a seminary that he was going to commission in his new diocese. Father DeAndres then turned to Father Joseph Rosati and recruited him. And so that was an important moment as well. So a lot of the names that we are familiar with today were answering the call and coming over very early on. And so with that, with the recruiting of the missionaries, they set sail from Bordeaux on the Ranger on June 12th of 1816, arriving in Baltimore July 26th of 1816. And then there was a second boat that came over with a group of nuns, and they sailed directly to New Orleans and reached the Ursuline Convent on January 3rd of 1817. And then for Dubourg himself, he set sail about a year later, July 1st of 1817, from Bordeaux as well on La Caravane, and arrived in Annapolis in 1817 in September, and traveled on to Baltimore, and then on to Pittsburgh by land. And at that point then, he took the Ohio River westward and southward, arriving in Kentucky and also Bardstown as well as near Louisville. Then they took a steamboat, Pequot, down the Ohio River, the rest of the way to the Mississippi River, and then up the Mississippi River, arriving at Apple Creek on the west bank. And then that placed them in St. Genevieve very shortly thereafter, December 31st of 1817. So they were able to celebrate New Year's Day, January 1st, 1818, Pontifical High Mass in St. Genevieve. Then they left there and traveled up to Cahokia. And from Cahokia, they traveled across to St. Louis, arriving January 5th, 1818, to a great celebration and parade where the citizens greeted them and took them to their cathedral, their church on the riverfront. Well, the church on the riverfront, as Dubourg noted, was barely more than a shed, and something needed to happen there. So he commissioned that the second log church be replaced and built a new brick church, which was 150 feet long and 70 feet wide. And that was designed and built in 1818. He did formally dedicate the church on January 9th of 1820. Those arches were bricked in. There were supposed to be side aisles along that, but they ran into a financial pandemic and they couldn't raise the money, so they said this is big enough, and they bricked in the arches, so that was that. But Cathedral Block at this point now contained a new church, extensive gardens, a grape arbor, stable, a refectory, 2 wells, a bathhouse, a cemetery, the bishop's home, and a college building, the St. Louis Academy, which is the predecessor to St. Louis University, and to which Bishop Dubourg pledged his personal library of 8,000 volumes. But true to his word, then Dubourg created these academies, and so to our south, the St. Louis, he sent down missionaries down there to build the St. Mary's of the Barons, St. Mary's Seminary. That's from 1818 to 1822, and a very, very beautiful and established facility there. Also, We also have Mother Duchenne coming to establish the first tuition-free school west of the Mississippi in 1818, the Duquette Mansion, the first academy of the Sacred Heart in St. Charles, Missouri. And also in that time period, certain St. Ferdinand's Church and Convent were built, the convent 1819 and the church 1821. And by the way, that is the church where Father DeSmet was ordained as a priest, and that still stands and is still with us here. Also of note, down in St. Genevieve, the old Louisiana Academy of 1808 and St. Genevieve Academy of 1819, that was taught by the Christian brothers, three Christian brothers who answered the call and came to this area. Also, then in 1818 to 1826, the American Mission and the St. Regis Seminary and St. Stanislaus Novitiates were established out in the Ferguson area. And so Bishop DeBerg offered the Jesuits the control of the St. Louis Academy on the riverfront, which then became St. Louis College in 1820 and St. Louis University after that. But he also turned over several hundred acres to the Jesuits for these missions and these seminaries here. And they were the local boarding schools and the only Catholic Indian school in the United States at this time. And they were there to educate and learn the customs of the indigenous peoples. And the two pluses there, that's the seminaries are to the Red Cross to the left, and to the right is St. Ferdinand Church there, where Father DeSmet was ordained September 23rd of 1827. Now, 1826 is an important year, and this is the 200th anniversary of this year of 1826. This is the founding of the Diocese of St. Louis, and that fell to Pope Leo XII, who divided the Louisiana Territory into two halves. The southern half, southern diocese, Louisiana, basically that state, and St. Louis was the diocese that you see encompassed in blue. So quite a large, virtually half of the country was under the Diocese of St. Louis, quite important. And with all the missionaries that came here, St. Louis became known as the Rome of the West. Then in 1828 to 1832, hospitals, orphanages, deaf education, higher education. So there were many people who rose to the task financially and spiritually to help establish St. Louis in so many ways, to serve so many people that needed the help. And so the Sisters of Charity arrived by stagecoach in November of 1828, and they formed the first Catholic orphanage for boys in the state of Missouri. And then that is basically the building to the left of the old cathedral, to the right is the rectory, the center, and this is the upper right-hand picture. So the old cathedral in the center and the orphanage to the left, basically where the highway passes by now. Also, Melanphy started the first free hospital here to provide care for all such indigent, sick, free persons without regard to color, country, or religion. So quite a magnanimous effort there. That was near basically where the Millennium Hotel site is today, but also this larger structure you see was built further north in St. Louis. And also then in 1832, St. Louis University moves from the riverfront to basically 9th and Washington Avenue, near where the Lambert Building is today. That was their campus for a number of years. Also, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet established their convent in 1836, and that's on the river bluffs to the south of St. Louis, and that site is still in use by those sisters. So really important work that they did serving the deaf children of this area. And so much beautiful work there. In 1831 to 1834, the Cathedral of St. Louis, we know it as the Old Cathedral, this is a rendering of this. And this is the building built between 1831 and 34, a prominent example of Greek Revival architecture. And it was dedicated October 26 of 1834. And it is the first building of national significance built in this state and the first cathedral west of the Mississippi River. And it was also designed by Joseph LeVay and George Martin. architects, the first architectural firm west of the Mississippi. They also designed the old courthouse as well. In 1840 to 43, Kenrick is now the bishop assigned to our diocese. And this map shows you the darker blocks of the earlier settlement, and then further up to the west, you can see the additional blocks as the city is expanding by leaps and bounds. And so he is at the helm of the old cathedral and the Diocese of St. Louis. 1847 to 64 sees the construction of St. John the Apostle and Evangelist, the pro-cathedral. But of note, in 1849, this was a really tough year in St. Louis. We had the Great Fire on the riverfront, we had the return of cholera, and we had anti-Irish riots in the streets. So quite a lot going on, a lot to deal with here in St. Louis. In addition to that, Kenrick really was concerned with the crowded nature of the riverfront, the old cathedral being there, and was thinking that the cathedral or the pro-cathedral should be located further to the west to serve the population as it was moving to the west. And so St. John the Apostle and Evangelist pro-cathedral became such a church. And that is just a little bit west of basically, I think, 16th and Chestnut Street is that location. As you can see from this map on the upper left, 1817s to 80s, St. Louis is dramatically expanding. You can see the boundaries moving westward with each move here, and the population growing to some 250,000 Catholics here, really quite a large population to serve. And so they definitely started to look for a new location for the new cathedral. However, many options existed. They kept trying and investigating them, but just as they thought they had one, then the population shifted still further west. And then there was also the economics of all that that would foil some of those plans. So sadly, Bishop Kenrick went to his grave without finding the site for the new cathedral. That task fell to Reverend John Kane. He was the next Archbishop of St. Louis, and he settled upon the site at Lindell, which we know today, and so he had a temporary cathedral. If you can imagine, that picture in the upper right-hand corner is temporary. Quite a notable church there at Maryland and Newstead. It's the northeast corner of the site that you see today. It would be behind the new cathedral where it's still standing. So that was put in place to serve the new cathedral. Also, but at that time in 1896, a massive tornado swept through St. Louis, destroying a great portion of South St. Louis, crossed the river, and even went northeasterly, destroying the east end of the East Bridge as well. So that tornado delayed a lot of building efforts regarding the new cathedral. This is the site that was picked for the new cathedral, as I said, at Newstead and Lindell, and you can see the plan. The red dots show the property, and the light pink color shows the temporary cathedral and the parish rectory. Both were temporary, viewed as temporary, and to be removed ultimately. The first design in 1901 was designed by Barnett, Haynes and Barnett architects, and they were working with Archbishop Kane, and so this was their design. And it was in the style of a Roman basilica with quite grand dimensions, 90 feet wide, 240 feet long, transepts 100 feet wide. The dome was 225 feet in height. And the early rendering shows 3 portals facing to the south for entries there. But as it so happens, in 1903-04, there's new visions for the area with the arrival of Archbishop John J. Glennon, arriving just before the 1904 World's Fair, and quite a time to arrive in St. Louis. The architects, Barnett, Haynes, and Barnett, by the way, designed the building you see on the lower right-hand side, the Palace of Liberal Arts. That one building was 9 acres under roof. So this was quite a grand scale of a World's Fair. Just a bit of a personal family connection. The stereoscopic slides on the left-hand side with the boats in the Grand Basin with those striped canopies. Those canvas awnings were provided by my grandfather, Herman Guenther, who owned Webb Hardware. And so he provided those canvas awnings for the dignitary boats in the Grand Basin there. But with Glennon, he decided he did not like the design that was already underway for a couple of years now, and he wanted to have a competition, a design competition, and open it up to architects from really around the world, from Europe, across the United States, and so on. And so he wanted to have something that did not use Gothic architecture. For him, he said, Gothic architecture with its pointed arches and spires reaches towards heaven, but Byzantine architecture with its splendid domes brings heaven down to earth. And so he set about this competition that encouraged that style of architecture. And they wrote a program for the competition, and I've got to see this in the archives at the Archdiocese. And it spelled out in no uncertain terms the rules, the regulations, what kind of drawings, letters of description, don't influence anybody, there's an advisory council, the compensation for competitors, and so on. Interestingly, they said, this is the kind of drawings we want, and they specified the pencil with the wash and so on, and they wanted to reveal the three-dimensional nature of the design by that stipulation. They also provided the plan to familiarize everybody with the site, pointing out that the building will probably be in the center of the site given the existing chapel and so on. And they wanted to have it set back from certain streets with setbacks. Of note, I love this one, because architects were from around the world, they didn't know about our climate necessarily. So they had a section on climatic conditions. And it says, it is also remarkable, our area where we're located is also remarkable for sudden changes in temperature and humidity, and for the large number of dark, smoky days in winter. So some things never change, and I looked up these various diagrams, if you will, of the wild variations that we get, and we're all very aware of it right now as we live through all these ups and downs with the temperature as we try to make our way to spring. So they were warning the competitors that we had a tough environment to deal with. But in 1906, a winner was declared, and lo and behold, it was the local firm of Barnett, Haynes, and Barnett. So they had a second opportunity to design this beautiful cathedral. And so they submitted this design with this Byzantine domes and interiors with a Romanesque exterior to the liking of the committee and Glennon. And Glennon remarked, we hope to have a very large, beautiful structure. Its seating capacity is estimated at between 4,000 and 5,000, and its cost will be at least $1 million. We do not expect to go into debt. It is a bad thing to have a mortgage between you and the Almighty. So the words to live by there. At any rate, the architects set to work in refining and designing and enhancing the design and structure of the competition-winning entry, and you see some of the drawings here. As they were working on that, they also were developing the specifications, which are also on file at the Archdiocese Archives. And here is a page opened up to the stone as definition, and here's one of the stone workers a few years later chipping away at a stone capital on the side of the cathedral there. Also, they addressed the structural reinforced concrete and fireproofing, and so this was while it is a very historic structure, it's very modern in its structural system, and also the reinforced concrete work was specified. You had to have experience in such as construction technology, and so this design was prepared by the Reinforced Concrete Company, structural concrete engineers, and Brussels and Viterbo consulting engineers. So they got top-notch engineers to create these reinforced concrete structures of the new cathedral. They also had specifications for the steel in terms of the hardness, the bending, medium steel, bending test, and so on. And here you see the steel cage for one of those great beams that supports the central dome, and you see the scale of the people standing alongside and within that steel frame with the bends in there, so all of that steel complying to the specifications. Also, placing of reinforcement and concreting in cold weather is probably the shortest specification I've ever seen, none. So you were not allowed to pour concrete in cold weather. Here is the central dome. There is an oculus there, which this gentleman standing next to you, and you can see the reinforcing bars wrapping around in its circular nature there. So a very modern technology. And then in terms of roofing, they described the three domes and the hip roofs and so on, and prepared drawings for that as well. There's three domes within, and on the exterior, the central dome is expressed, while the two other domes, north and south, are beneath the hip roofs. And the finale here basically went on to say, you can contact the architects, ask all the questions you want, but if you don't ask the questions and you don't know the answers, it's your responsibility. You really do not have, we will not recognize your pleas for the fact that you missed something. So, very stern warning. So in 1906, they have the drawings all ready, the specifications are prepared, it's ready to go to bid and receive those prices. But this newspaper article goes on to say that the Archbishop would like to consider moving it to a site further west. And that was an intriguing discovery, and in point of fact, it was about 3 blocks further to the west at the site along Kings Highway, which was formerly owned by William K. Bixby, who was president of the American Car and Foundry, president of Washington University, and he was also president of the St. Louis Art Museum and a trustee of the St. Louis Public Library. And he purchased that from John Kaufman, who was a magnate and a grain dealer. And on this site, Kaufman built a 45-room mansion with an art gallery. So it was quite the place. And so the site that I have here is the site where the building is ultimately located, but the site under consideration was 3 blocks to the west along Kings Highway. And it made a lot of sense if you think about 1906, 2 years earlier, the World was here at the World's Fair. It's on Kings Highway. You think about the Holy Corners just to the north and the westward movement of various churches. The groundbreaking occurs May 1st, 1907, and it is to be located this newspaper article describes the first spadeful of dirt is turned at the very center of the cathedral, under the center of the dome, and that was marked out by George Dennis Barnett, the architect. He paced it off and figured exactly where that was, and Glennon, with his typical Irish wit, they proceeded along with the various dignitaries, and then he said, "Mr. Casey shall be the last, and then we will leave him to do the rest of the digging because Mr. Casey was responsible for the foundations." And I wanted to prove myself that this really was the very center of the site and the center of the dome, and sure enough, that is exactly true. That's exactly where the center of the dome is and where that first shovel was turned. And so the foundations were underway and very quickly and professionally installed. And it was done by St. Louis Contracting Company, known as Casey and O'Toole. They were founded in 1892 by 2 cousins, Jerome Casey and George O'Toole. Their father, Timothy O'Toole, I've come to find out because I know the Craddocks and their 4th generation of this family. Timothy was an Irish immigrant who helped to build the Eads Bridge. So the first generation helps to build the Eads Bridge, the second generation builds the foundations of the cathedral. So quite an interesting family and great to know. Bob Craddock was 4th generation with the Stone Center. Here you see the superstructure being erected. They had to erect these three tower cranes centered under each dome to raise the materials upward with greater ease. 1908, October 18th, the cornerstone is laid, and that was quite a ceremony there with 40,000 members, 79 parishes marching in a parade, and that was 2 hours and 10 minutes of a parade. That cornerstone was set in the southeast corner of the cathedral, and that's where you can see it to this day. Then the steel and stone goes up, so they continue on with the granite walls. Here's the portals at the south entrance to the cathedral, while portions of it are steel framed and they're being erected. and then the iron workers forging the hot rivets are on the left-hand side. And then shaping the stone, again, these very talented, very dedicated stonemasons are chipping and chiseling away at this gray granite on the property to the north of the cathedral, and very diligently doing their work, and then hoisting it up to an upper level, to the mezzanine level. Here they are getting the formwork ready and pouring buckets of concrete into the forms at a higher elevation. And then bricklayers and stone setters working side by side as the tower is rising up. Those wooden arches are being formed for the brick arches for the Romanesque architecture. And I would note, it's been asked of me, the stone capitals, when you look at the facade, you will see stone capitals which are not finished to this day. They were put up that way. They were intended to come back and chisel those and refine them and make them perfect, but they've never been done so. And so you have these shapes of column capitals in rough form in stone, but never finalized as intended. The modern structure with traditional form. So here you can see the transepts, those half circles on either side of the cathedral being formed, again, in reinforced concrete. And so also, designed by those structural engineers. And here is a time when, with Cardinal Glennon, Archbishop Glennon, I should say, in the top hat, inspecting the progress here with a group of dignitaries, as you can see those tower cranes raising up the materials. The reinforced concrete being taken up to the rooftops, and the picture on the lower right hand still gives me goosebumps. These are the signalmen standing literally at the parapet, at the edge of the parapet to signal it's time to raise the stone to an upper level, obviously pre-OSHA. But it was very dangerous, but they were very, very daring constructors. This is inside the dome. It's actually a double dome of concrete, an outer dome and an inner dome with this concrete reinforced frame within. And as I said, the oculus with a circular opening with the horizontal circular reinforcing shown in the lower left-hand corner. But George Burnett wrote that the materials throughout are absolutely fireproof and of the most modern development. All structural features are of reinforced concrete in which new and original structural formations have been employed and are attracting the attention of the architects and engineers of the world, taking interest in this structural phase as modernly applied. So it really was very modern structure, even though very traditional forms. Here you can see in 1917 with the volumes completed, this magnificent interior, but it's all raw concrete, reinforced concrete, prior to any of those beautiful mosaics being applied. And I would note also that the central dome had twice as many arched head openings as are today. Those were, every other one was bricked in per the design later on of that, the mosaic design in the 60s. Here's the team, so faces to go with the team here. George Burnett, John Haynes, and Tom Burnett, two brothers and a brother-in-law, and the builders, father and son, John Robinson and Roy, and then the superintendent's lower left-hand corner with George Burnett, architect, and then to the right, the key members of the management and construction group. So I love these pictures because it puts a face and humanity to this incredible effort. And George Barnett wrote the most lovely, sentiment here, to whose untiring energy and skill is faithfully, intelligently, and honestly carrying out the plans for the building of the Cathedral St. Louis. St. Louis will owe another debt of gratitude. So very, very grateful and thankful to them. Upon completion, the architects had this photograph taken to the upper left-hand corner. I got to hold that in my hands. On the back side, it's a dedicated compliments of the architects to John J. Glennon. But look at how it towers and dominates above the landscape, above the surrounding areas. And lower left, I found a paper that talked about the first all-motorized funeral in St. Louis occurring October of 1911. So it still has 3 years to go to be completed, but they still felt they wanted to have an all-motorized funeral service at that time. And then in then you see again the mother church, if you will, and its dominant profile rising above the neighborhoods and those they served in that building. The first Mass is October 18th, 1914. The Tiffany Rose windows are installed by that time. Beautiful blue window to the south and red window to the north. And the cathedral's pews have a beautiful design, an artful design with an Irish cross and a fleur-de-lis that symbolize both the Ireland and St. Louis, a thoughtful reference to both the city and the Irish-born John J. Glennon. The first wedding occurred 2 days later, October 20th of 1914, and that was the wedding of Kathleen McBride, the daughter of the donors of the high altar, William Cullen McBride, and his wife, Catherine Mannon McBride. And it's an amazing effort when you think that this was still basically just finished construction of the superstructure, but not the interiors completed entirely. And to decorate this, they brought in 20 blossoming orange trees from California in heated cars, and 5,000 white chrysanthemums, and just, it was just amazing. They just transformed the interiors. I came to find out that William Cullen McBride became the largest independent oil producer in the United States, and his estate was valued at more than $10 million upon his death in 1917. Today's dollars, $216 billion. So quite a supporter of the cathedral and quite a wealthy individual. The first mosaics were installed in 1915. They were commissioned in 1912 with the Tiffany Company, and they engaged Aristide Leonore, an Italian architect, to design it in the Italian style. Italian style being a more flat painterly approach to the mosaics. And so they are not like the Byzantines, if you will, Byzantine style. But they were on display in New York City and before being brought here and installed in 1915. The Kilgan organ arrives in 1915. This is a $10,000 gift, and its design fits with the architecture of the cathedral. Also at the same time, the Kenrick Theological Seminary is constructed in that year. In 1916, the baldacchino is installed, again, a gift of the McBride family. And so you can see it's a miniature version of the cathedral basilica with its dome and apses on either side. And also that same year, the cathedral school is built in 1916. 1917, the Blessed Sacrament Chapel to the right of the baldacchino is built and installed with its mosaics. And of note, those beautiful gates that lead up to that entrance of the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, in fact, had their origins in the 1904 World's Fair. They came as a donation from the Austrian exhibit of 1904. And I always wondered where that building stood. It was actually on the grounds of what is today Washington University. And as you look to the west of Brookings Hall, it would have been a first building to the right on the lower level, lower terrain. So it's interesting to know where these gates came from as gifts of the Austrian government. 1920 to 21, Emil Frey Art Glass Company puts in the first mosaics of their time, and it happens to be the pulpit, as well as some mosaics around the cathedral, the chair of the Archbishop. And so that marks the beginnings of Emil Frey Studios, who had emigrated from Germany, had worked in the arts over there in art glass and mosaics as well, so he knew those crafts very well. In 1922, Rosati Kane High School is built, and it is the design of Henry P. Hess, a noted architect in St. Louis, and it's just to the east of the cathedral. In 1923, Ravenna Mosaics is founded by Emil Frey. The idea being that the Archbishop would like to work with a local company. Emil Frey represented that and brought his skills and artistry to it, but he also knew from Germany the firm of Pohl and Wagner, who could provide the capabilities to produce a lot of stained glass, beautifully done in mass quantities. So they formed this partnership, and he founded Ravenna Mosaics. And then Paul Heiduck then came from Germany to St. Louis to install these mosaics. The first Byzantine mosaics, 1923, designed by August Etkin, and they are in the transept, so in the very center when you look right and left, those curving walls, both arcades, both levels, those are to the design of August Etkin and represent the first Byzantine mosaics. And then the Arch of Triumph is 1924. That's the arch that's over the basilica that when you face the altar. And then alongside that, there are two pendentives that were also installed in 1924. The art of the mosaics is quite remarkable. The artist will draw a pencil sketch that gets translated to a maquette color sketch, and then the reality is built in mosaic. But you can see on the right-hand side, the artists here are interpreting that drawing that's propped up there of Moses, and they're picking out just the right color of glass tesserae and adhering it to a paper backing, which is a drawing of Moses in reverse, because that face will be placed into wet mortar eventually. If I take a close-up of Moses here and the incredible three-dimensional qualities of that and the range of colors, this was done actually as an example by Ravenna Mosaics, Pohl and Wagner, to show the quality that they could produce. This is in the museum at the Cathedral Basilica, and it's not within the cathedral proper up above. That's in the lower level. The actual Moses that is in the Arch of Triumph here is on the right-hand side. He's holding the Ten Commandments here, and you can see it's a much flatter design. The artists realized it was much further away, and therefore they created a more stylized, almost modern, less detailed version of Moses there. 1925, August Ecken designs the Beatitudes in the nave of the cathedral. Also designs the arch soffit that surrounds the north rose window, as well as a couple of pendentives of saints. In 1925, there were other commissions commissioned in preparation for the centennial, the 100th anniversary of the diocese. And so these involved various arches as well as the All Souls Chapel. These are some close-ups of the arches and the maquettes. The bull noses that surround those arches has been studied in this sample mosaic. It's a flat sample, but in reality, it's a bull nose that traces the arch, the tops and bottoms of the arches. In 1924-25, they deviated from the mosaics and turned to Conrad Schmidt Studios for an al secco, it's wet plaster on dry plaster painting in the transepts in order to finish more of the interiors quickly before the centennial. And in point of fact, even though it was a quick response, it stayed there from 1924 to 1984 until it was damaged by water infiltration, and those transepts were executed in modern mosaics. Also that al secco method was employed around the rose windows at the north and south end of the church as well, the cathedral. And 1925 marks the building of McBride High School, also donated by the McBride family. In 1926, there's a mosaic master plan for the cathedral prepared by Ravenna Mosaics and Emil Frey, and they created this massive three-dimensional model to show the vision of what could be, and that was shown at the Chicago Exposition in 1926. 1926, June 29th, the cathedral was finally consecrated. Again, a huge gathering, assemblage of prelates. 50,000 people greeted the dignitaries, and Archbishop Glennon and 4 bishops consecrated the 5 altars simultaneously. So quite a huge gathering with 59 bishops and archbishops and 1,000 priests and members of religious orders. The 1927 to 28 was the completion of the ambulatory ceilings. Those are the hallways, the passageways that wrap around the nave. Beautiful, beautiful geometric patterns above, so take time to study those when you can. In 1927 to 31, the design of the vestibule was undertaken, and in fact, John von Wicht in 1929 came up with a more affordable option to the 1927 version. And in this, if you can imagine this being a flat ceiling, brick interior with dark corners at the top, he said if he could create a barrel vault with highly reflective glass tesserae mosaics, he could lighten up and brighten the space and amplify the light coming in from the 3 arch windows to the south. And that's exactly what happened. And this is depicting the life of King St. Louis IX and namesake of St. Louis and the cathedral. 1929 to 31, the St. Louis Preparatory Seminary is built, the present Kendrick Lennon Seminary, also to the design of Hess, of Henry Hess. So really a very talented architect who designed Rosati Kane High School, McBride High School, CBC High School, and Mary Queen of Peace Church. 1938, a picture of an ordination of the newly ordained 20 Kendrick Seminary graduates graduating into the priesthood. 1940 to 41, the rectory is built in to the same style as the cathedral itself, gray granite with green tile roofs. It also marks the arrival of Dr. Mario Salvador, a really noted musician, director of music, organist, and choir director who served from 1940 to 1992, a noteworthy person. 1943, this is a very touching moment here. There's a military memorial mass, and this was for CBC graduates who had gone off to fight in World War II. 1,400 served, 40 paid the ultimate sacrifice, and this mass was a memorial to those who lost their lives in World War II. My father was a graduate of CBC in 1933, so was not involved with this, but at any rate, a very moving moment, and it tells you that we come together not only to celebrate and pray, but also to mourn as a community in this space. In 1946, Cardinal Glennon returned to St. Louis. He was elevated to a cardinal from archbishop, and went to Rome to receive that great honor from the Pope. He did receive that on February 18th of 1946. He returned to his native Ireland on the way back. He had caught a cold on the plane and was so severe that he passed away in Dublin, Ireland. And so when he returned on March 16th, 1946, it was to his funeral, not to this great celebration. But St. Louis had laid out Linda Boulevard with all these lights and prepared for a great celebration, and instead it turned into a really massive funeral service, and many, many people coming out to pay their respects. With that, then Joseph Elmer Ritter is elevated to Archbishop here, and in his first year of 1946, he instructs all the pastors of the Archdiocese to end racial segregation in parochial schools, and then go on to order St. Louis Catholic schools to be desegregated in 1947. And this was 7 years before the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1954. 1947, Hildreth Meir, a great American muralist, well known for Art Deco designs, had a 40-year career, completed over 100 commissions, known across the country, and a tremendous, tremendous artist. This was her first commission, the East Arch Soffit above the Passover, and here you see it beautifully designed and installed. The 1949, the new Kilgan organ is installed, and now this organ can actually be wheeled out in front of the altar for great concerts here, so that is an improvement to the earlier version. 1951, Pontifical Boys Choir, Dr. Mario Salvador assembled the youth of the parish to form this choir. Many people I've heard from have served in that choir. 1952, there was a thorough cleaning and a new roof of the cathedral. They had to wash away 38 years of accumulated carbon deposits, and in addition to that, they entirely re-roofed it with green Ludovici tile as well. 1954, Bishop Rosati returned. Bishop Rosati, as you recall, had the old cathedral built. When he was in Rome, he passed away. He was buried there for 111 years. And the St. Louis Archdiocese asked if his mortal remains could be returned and interred in the Cathedral of St. Louis, and that was granted. And so this is the ceremony where he came back to St. Louis and was interred in the cathedral. In 1955, there was need for a new sacristy. It was never built in the original plans. Very interesting modern design that beautifully relates to the historic nature of the building. Here it is under construction in 1956, and they are also working on the lighting design inside the oculus of the dome. And in 1957, that addition is completed by Magula and Quick. It's a very beautiful sort of mid-century modern design within the interiors, but very respectfully added onto with the historic Romanesque and Byzantine architecture of the exterior. This corridor of coats of arms now could be claimed as a passageway. That's where the priest used to vest for Mass, right behind the baldacchino. In 1957, the Dome of the 12 Apostles was designed by Hildreth Meyer, and she had these aluminum bowls, these metal bowls, spun so that she could design in 3 dimensions the Dome of the Apostles and get a better feel for that. She also had a banner hung in the space to verify the height of those apostles at 14 feet in height to make sure they were the right scale. She also designed the drinking deer and meandering grapevine behind the north rose window. And here you see them, the 2 deer, and you see the process of sketch to maquette to full-size painting to full-size mosaics. At any rate, this is a very beautiful sign of spiritual life, drinking of the water, and quite beautifully done. She was also noted for her unified expression. She was working in this space that was designed by many mosaicists, and she had the ability to unite the space beautifully with her new designs. And so you can see she added 2 new pendentives in the dome, supporting the dome of the 12 apostles. And she also designed the windows that are surrounding that dome, and each window next to the apostle refers to that apostle. So this one I have pictured here is showing, referring to Peter, and it has a rooster in there, and that's because of the quote, "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And so that was Jesus talking to Peter. And so it memorializes various lessons in the Bible as well. She was also asked to design a unifying frieze. In 1958, there is a continuous, it's a glazed and gilded terracotta band of acanthus leaves in red, gold, and green majolica. And at any rate, that is surrounding at the base of the walls where they meet the arched and dome ceilings. She also designed the pendentives for the saints who spread Catholicism in America. This is supporting the dome of local history at the south end of the cathedral. And here's a view looking upward at those features there. And also that unifying approach, again, is brought to bear. You can see the design for the south dome on the upper left-hand side, local history, and the dome of the apostles. And then the center pieces featured there. So similar colors, similar patterns, but different. So it's a both-and approach to help unify these ideas. The meandering grapevine is also used extensively in these various areas, again, symbolizing life. I am the vine, you are the branches. And so, again, a message being communicated very beautifully and subtly. And then the work of the Educational Apostolic in the St. Louis Arch Soffits is designed by Hildreth Meyer. But this was to be one of her last designs because she died suddenly in May of 1961 due to sudden onset of leukemia. Her assistant, Nina Wheeler-Blake, continued her work and continued the drawings that were already in process to help realize Hildreth Meyer's vision. The south wall, you can see again this beautiful, almost Art Deco pattern of Hildreth Meyer surrounding that rose window. Quite a beautiful composition. And also the arches of the historical arch in that area, talking about the history of St. Louis. Each arch has something different to communicate. There's the educational apostolate, the arch of St. Vincent de Paul and his followers, the social apostolate, and the history of spiritual growth in St. Louis. All, when you look up, you can learn a lot about the growth of St. Louis. And I would also point out that Hildreth Meyer's grandson, Ted Dunn, posed as a model, as a young boy, as the boy with the crutches in one of these arches here, the social apostolate. And in another, the educational apostle of St. Louis, Hilly Dunn, the granddaughter of Hildreth Meyer, along with Ted Dunn, her brother, posed as a brother and sister amongst the nuns there who were educators. And so I've gotten to know Ted and Hilly through the writing of the book and the research. They're wonderful people. the Arch of the Last Judgment, 1963, John Heinrich de Rosen. And in this, it's God is in the center, who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. De Rosen would actually make models of mock-ups of the cloth figures to understand how the light hit those figures, and then created these three-dimensional drawings. And his depiction of hell is in the lower right-hand side of this arch. It's not an inferno, it's cold covered with ice for lack of love. So that was his interpretation of hell. Also, flanking that Arch of Last Judgment, there's two pendentives on either side, and those were, in point of fact, designed in 1924 and fabricated, but were stored so long that the backing of the paper broke down and they had to be rebuilt and remade and reinstalled then in 1963, installed for the first time. 1963, exterior restoration and interior mosaics, so scaffolding everywhere, outside and inside, as the cathedral's being repaired, as well as mosaics. It was also the year that sadly marked the assassination of John Kennedy as president, and they held a memorial mass, a requiem mass for him in the cathedral at the same time as his mass in DC. And Vatican II transformed the location of the altar. Now the priests were facing to the people, and so there was a temporary wooden altar that was placed out in the foreground there. And August 24th of '64, Ritter made history at the Old Kiel Auditorium when he celebrated the world's first authorized mass in English. This is the Central Dome of 1965, and here you see Arno and Paul Heiduck installing the panels of the mosaics into the wet mortar, and then the backing is removed once that's dry. 1966, the new cathedral school was designed by Murphy and Mackey. To do that, they had to tear down the 1916 cathedral school. 1967, the sanctuary mosaics are installed. These are the East Sanctuary, the Passover, and the West Sanctuary, the Last Supper. They again were designed in 1924, but not installed until 1967. Passing of Cardinal Ritter in 1967 is seen in these photographs here as well. 1968, there was a memorial mass for Dr. Martin Luther King. When he was assassinated, everybody gathered again to mourn that, to mourn his passing, and assembled for mass here in the cathedral. Likewise, there was a large assemblage a march that started at the Arch grounds and then made its way westward through the city of St. Louis and out to Forest Park, a really large gathering before members of the parish then traveled for his funeral mass. The new marble altar was installed in 1968 to replace the temporary wooden altar. This was built in Italy in beautiful mosaics with peacocks representing eternity. In 1970, Bishop Rosati was reinterred yet again, this time in the old cathedral, underneath the altar of the old cathedral, the cathedral that he built. So permission was granted to relocate his mortal remains there. In 1972 to 76, the cathedral becomes a St. Louis landmark, 1973, and you can see that it's a very distinguished building. And also, Joe Murphy designed the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Shrine in 1976 there. In 1978, there's a memorial mass for Pope Paul VI, and also the St. Ferdinand's, the Friends of St. Ferdinand's are formed to carry on the good works in that church and convent there. In 1980, Archbishop May is installed as the new Archbishop. People are gathering anywhere they can in nooks and crannies to take in that ceremony. In 1980, reading is fundamental. Our friend Julius Hunter kicked that program off, and he shared his love of reading and writing with the students at the Cathedral School. And Julius told me of how he learned how to read from his older brother, Van. He would read the St. Louis phone book as well as products on food labels out of the grocery store. So he learned every which way he can. He went on to write children's stories, and of course his love of education here is seen with him and the students. In 1980 to 85, there's a massive restoration of the exterior of the granite and also the tile roof as well. And it had started, the half domes had started to leak. That damaged those El Seco transepts. And so those mosaics were then taken down, the Alseco paintings were taken down in favor of a permanent tile work, mosaic design by Mary Reardon. Mother Teresa also visited us that year in 1982, and Max Starkloff was instrumental in getting accessibility provided for the disabled to enter in the west side on that ramp. So thanks to him for that. These are the early sketches of Mary Reardon to design the design of the transept, the east transept, that develops into refined designs. They would make trips down there every so often down to Fredericktown to Ravenna Mosaics to check on the progress. Here you see the pancakes of glass in the upper center there. Literally 7,000 shades of glass pancakes were made. Those are chiseled to pick out just the right color in the right shape, and they were chiseled to do that. And here is a close-up of that glass pancake, and then a close-up of a hand being formed. And you can see the scale of it with the tweezers. So 500 pieces per square foot of glass tesserae mosaics. Over 83,000 square feet is 41.5 million pieces within the cathedral. Here is the east transept upon completion. Quite a modern interpretation, which was asked of Mary Reardon to execute that. In 1984, the acoustics were enhanced by the pipes, the organ pipes being exposed. Werner Burks was the architect for the cathedral, serving as a consultant, and he recommended that they be taken out of the bronze grills and being left exposed so that the full body, the volume could be appreciated by the parishioners. And then in 1985, Amel Studios produces these beautiful glass clear-story windows that temper the light coming in that were tending to overwhelm the glass mosaics. So again, the new generation of Amel Studio continuing the work of Amel Sr. In 1984 to 86, the west transept is designed and implemented. And again, you can see the artist picking out these pieces of mosaics with the maquette, with the painting in front of him. And again, look at the scale of these mosaics with a pencil and a tweezer as he's gluing these pieces onto a paper backup that has pencil outlines to show the face and the eyes and the nose and so on. Everything's done in reverse though, because what you see there is embedded into the wet mosaics mortar, the wet mortar of the dome, and then when it's dry, then the paper backing is removed. And so that face that you're seeing there is in that arched soffit right there. So again, just an amazing labor of love. This is a design that tells the Ravenna Mosaics how many pieces and panels have been installed and how much is left to go. And again, it's not like squares of panels that are being put up. These are on curves in plan and in section, so it's a three-dimensional sphere that they are applying all these jig-jag patterns to, everything fitting together perfectly. It's truly a miracle that all of this comes together. And again, as I mentioned, done in reverse, so I Have Made You is in reverse because that will be the face that's put into the mortar of the dome. And so that's how that was accomplished. In 1986, the Chapel of Interment is completed, designed by Fraser and Thompson, two architects, educators at Washington University, friends of mine. Beautiful barrel vaulted space in the lower level next to the museum. And then in 86, also the dedication of the restored altar occurs by Archbishop May, reinterring, replacing and installing the relics of the mortars into that altar. 1987-88, the historical bay on the east side featuring Cardinal Ritter and all his work in desegregation and then in working with people of various faiths and other ministers is recognized in that panel. And then the west panel, the historical west wall panel, you can see here with Joliet Marquette on the left, Father Despent in the middle, and the Bolivian missions on the right. The Mosaic Museum was completed in 1992, and so this is where people can go to admire the process of the mosaics. It's in the lower level, and then they can go upstairs and have a much deeper appreciation for what they are seeing. And then Arno Heideck is honored for his lifetime of work in 1992. And this is also the year that John Romeri becomes the organist and choir master as well. And the cathedral concerts begins in the Archdiocese of St. Louis that brings others to the interiors there. And then the cathedral is elevated to basilica by the Pope. This is done in April 4th of 1997. And there you see the umbrellino, which is signifies that it is a cathedral now, cathedral basilica. And to also memorialize that, there's the umbrellino crest prepared by Emil Fry and his associates, Robert Fry, along with Stephen Fry. And this is in the center above the arch, in the arch of the door, central door. And this is symbolizing the elevation to Cathedral Basilica. In 1999, we have the seal of the millennium, which seals the doors and is broken only at the end of the year. And then in '99, we also have the visit from the Pope, as folks may remember, quite a gathering. The Angel of Harmony is designed and installed in 1999, and it is designed to emphasize the universality of God's love for all people. And then in the Sacred Heart, the Shrine of the Sacred Heart 2007 is installed in the West Transept, and we also received Michelangelo's Pietà, a replica bust as well, one of two in the world. You can see that as well. Kenrick Glennon is expanded and renovated during the 2008 to 20 time period. The organ is restored in this 2008 to 2020 period. And transformational lighting occurs by Randy Burkett, who improved the lighting 300%, increased it 300%, and saved 87% of the energy. So it's an amazing tale of re-illumination of that interior. Randy illuminated the arch as well. And then there was the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage that came through St. Louis pilgrims that walked from San Francisco to St. Louis for a Mass here on their way to Indianapolis. Sadly, the Angel of Harmony was damaged severely, but I'm glad that it was restored just recently and reinstalled as well. And then lastly, Pope Leo XIV was elevated in 2025. He spent a year here, 1977-78, at Immaculate Conception Church, which you see here, serving as a novice, so his very first year in the Augustinians. And then I would just close with a personal connection to Barnett Haynes and Barnett. They designed St. Anne's Orphan Asylum, which you see here. It was built in 1904 at the time of the World's Fair. And this is where I came into the world in 1954, and was adopted there 9 weeks later. And when we found this picture of the ward room, my wife said, "Maybe now you know the room you were born in." And I said, "Well, I've always loved a good bay window with natural light and views in all directions." So at any rate, that's where I came into the world, and I'm very, very grateful. So I'm going to wrap it up then with that. I'm sorry I've gone a bit long here, but I am going to leave you with one last thing here, and this is the words of Monsignor Teltors when he was reflecting upon the parishioners. And he said, perhaps a mosaic in the end is our best comparison, as each of us adds to the beauty of the parish family and creates a magnificent design for the glory of God. And so I think also these workmen, and think about how they contributed, dedicated their lives to the efforts and the realization, and perhaps a mosaic is their best comparison, as each of them contributed to their part in the beauty that we behold today. And lastly, I would ask that all of us think how we further reflect on each of us, like mosaics, how do each of us contribute our unique gifts to make our world more beautiful? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the wonderful talk. We can all make it back next month, March 24th. Esley Hamilton will be giving us a talk. He's the past preservation history historian of the St. Louis County Parks. His talk is entitled William Morris and the Arts and Crafts Movement in America. Thanks for coming, everyone. Drive safe. Good night.
Thank you. sorry. All right. Sorry. Couldn't you?